They say you remember moments, not days. And I remember this one so clearly, it could have happened 10 minutes ago instead of 10 years. The stale taste of coffee in my mouth. The quiet buzz of the baby monitor on the kitchen counter. The rain tapping against the window. And her voice, Elena's voice, cutting through it all like a scalpel. I just want him to disappear forever. Cease to exist. I stood frozen in the hallway, still gripping the grocery bags I'd just brought in. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. But the truck broke down, and dispatch rerouted everything. A cosmic accident or a blessing, depending on how you look at it. Her voice wasn't angry. That's what stuck with me. It wasn't the voice of someone yelling in the heat of the moment. No, she was calm. Too calm. Calculated. I don't care how he goes. I just want him out of the picture, she continued. There was a pause, and then another voice, a man's voice, chuckled low on the other end of the line. You're serious? As a heart attack, she said. I'm sick of living like this. Sick of looking at him. I didn't hear the rest. I couldn't. I dropped the groceries, a bag of rice splitting open and spilling across the floor like snow. Cease to exist. That was the phrase that haunted me. She didn't want a divorce. She wanted erasure. Not a split. A deletion. And suddenly every weird moment, every late-night errand, every quiet phone call, every side glance when she thought I wasn't looking, it all locked into place like puzzle pieces I didn't want to see. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was done. And I was supposed to be gone. I didn't confront her. What would have been the point? What would she have said? Oh, that was just pillow talk with my boyfriend. No. I did the only thing I could do with a shred of dignity. I vanished. Left my phone, my car, everything but a duffel bag and a stash of cash I'd been saving for a down payment on a house she never wanted. I walked into a Greyhound station with a busted wallet and walked out of that city a ghost. For 10 years, I built. Brick by damn brick. I scrubbed dishes in backwater diners, flipped furniture in college towns, sold vintage watches online, and coded apps in hotel rooms with spotty Wi-Fi and cardboard curtains. I slept on floors, on benches, once even in a storage locker behind a casino in Reno. But every insult she ever hurled, every look of contempt she gave me, every memory of that voice saying she wanted me to disappear, it all fueled the fire. I made myself harder, sharper, smarter. I became everything she said I'd never be. And then, I became more. The company I started as a simple logistics tracking tool exploded when I licensed it to 3 freight firms in the Midwest. Then came the investors. Then the contracts. Then the international markets. And before I knew it, I was exactly what she never imagined. The richest man in the city I left behind. A ghost-turned legend. The return wasn't dramatic. It wasn't supposed to be. I was in town for a merger. My name hadn't been publicized yet. I owned everything through shell corporations and blind trusts. No press, no noise. But I had to see it. The city. The place where I lost everything. Call it closure. Call it curiosity. Call it revenge. I booked the top floor of the Avalon Grand Hotel, the same one I used to deliver food to when I worked double shifts. Funny how things circle back. And that's when I saw her. Bent over a mop bucket, wearing a faded uniform and rubber gloves, hair tied back with strands of gray showing through. Elena. She turned. And the second her eyes met mine, the mop handle slipped from her hand. She stumbled back, hitting the wall behind her. Her knees gave out. She collapsed to the floor. I stepped forward, calm. I didn't yell, didn't gloat. What happened to you? I asked. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Just a whisper of my name. Not the nickname. Not the casual tone she used when I was the man fixing her clogged sink or driving her to her Pilates class. She said my full name. The way you say a ghost's name when you realize he's real. And that's where the Rael story begins. Because I wasn't just back. I came back to collect. She sat there, stunned, mouth half open, breath hitching in her throat, like the air around her had turned to ice. I didn't reach down to help her up. I wasn't that man anymore. Elena, I said again, slow and deliberate, as if the name might shatter if I said it too loud. It's been a long time. Still no words. Just that same pale face, eyes darting like she wanted to run but couldn't remember how her legs worked. A cleaning cart clattered somewhere behind her, out of view, and I caught the reflection of another staff member peeking down the hallway, watching like this was some soap opera unraveling in real time. But it wasn't fiction. It was history colliding with consequence. I bent slightly, not to help her, but just to meet her eye level. You said you wanted me to disappear, I said, my voice even. So I did. She flinched like the words slapped her. And good. They were meant to. I straightened, tugged the cuffs of my tailored coat, and took one long look at the woman who once whispered promises into my ear while making plans behind my back. Now she was scrubbing other people's floors. And I owned half the damn building. She finally found her voice. Weak, rasped, barely audible. You're alive? That almost made me laugh. The irony. Contrary to your wish, yes, I said. Very alive. Very present. Very successful. I let the words hang between us. Elena blinked rapidly, trying to find composure, trying to gather the pieces of whatever fragile facade she'd built to survive the last decade. You have no idea, she started, but I cut her off with a raised hand. Save it, I said, colder than the hotel's marble floor. I'm not here to hear your side. I heard it once. That was enough. I didn't stay to listen to her excuses, her pleas, the regrets that probably only bloomed once the money dried up and the man she bet on turned out to be a busted check. Instead, I walked into the elevator alone. The doors closed behind me, sealing the moment like a tomb. Back in the penthouse suite, I poured myself a scotch and looked out over the city. Funny, really. From up here, the streets looked like veins. Narrow, pulsing, feeding a heart I no longer cared about. 10 years ago, I would have given anything to be seen. Now, let them wonder. Let her suffer. But something told me this wasn't the end. No, this was the prelude. Because when a ghost returns, it doesn't come empty-handed. I had my team pull records that night. Not for vengeance. For strategy. I wanted to know what she'd done with the life she stole. Where she'd ended up. Who she'd run to when I was no longer around to foot the bills or take the blame. My head of operations sent a report by morning. It came with photos. Elena had married 6 months after I vanished. No surprise there. A former co-worker of mine. I remembered him. Slick. Too many colognes. Hands always in his pockets, like they were searching for someone else's wallet. They divorced 2 years later. Apparently, he took off with what little she had left, including the lease to a bakery she tried to open using marriage funds that were never legally hers. Poetic, in a twisted way. She traded loyalty for lust. Security for excitement. Now she had none of the above. And as of 6 months ago, she was bankrupt. Living in a rundown apartment complex and working shifts at the hotel under a different last name. No friends. No family. No fortune. Just ghosts. I stared at her personnel file and thought about that voice again. Her voice, whispering, I want him to disappear forever. And I had. But now I was back. And she'd have to live with that. I didn't hear from her the next day, or the one after that. But I knew she would come. Guilt festers. Regret itches. Especially when it smells money. And me? I wasn't just money now. I was the empire her betrayal had helped build. On the 3rd morning, she came. I was sitting in the lobby lounge, sipping an espresso, reading the financial section like any ordinary man, not the one who now had half the boardrooms on speed dial. She stood at the edge of the room in her faded uniform, wringing her hands like a child caught stealing candy. Her hair was tied back, her eyes wide. She looked smaller somehow. Not shorter. Just diminished. May I? She started, then stopped, voice cracking like the truth she'd once buried. I gestured to the seat across from me without looking up from the paper. She sat, knees tight together, eyes flickering to the watch on my wrist. Not for the time. For the brand. Patek Philippe. A cool $110,000 on the secondary market. I used to sell plasma to buy her birthday gifts. Now I wore her betrayal on my wrist like a trophy. I wasn't thinking clearly back then, she said. I smiled. You were thinking clearly enough to say the words. I heard them plain as day. Her mouth opened, then shut. She looked down. Shame, or strategy. Things, they got hard after you left, she said. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle it. I set the paper down, leaned forward. Spare me the sympathy play, Elena. I know what you did. I know who you did. Don't insult either of us by pretending it was a moment of weakness. A flicker of temper crossed her face. Good. Let the real her slip. I was angry, she hissed. You were working too much. Never home. I was lonely. You stopped seeing me. You mean I stopped funding your fantasy life? I corrected. I was building a future. You were busy auditioning for better offers. She looked away, biting her lip. It was the same tactic she used when she used to get out of tickets or win arguments. But it didn't work here. Not anymore. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said quietly. No, I said, sipping my espresso, you're asking for relevance. And unfortunately, that application's been denied. She stood abruptly. You think you're untouchable now? I smiled. I know I am. But I wasn't finished with her. Not yet. You see, revenge isn't about rage. It's about the slow choke of realization. So I made a call. That evening, Elena was called up to the manager's office. A mysterious VIP guest had requested her as their personal room attendant for a week. The tip alone could pay her rent. She didn't question it. Room 4802. The penthouse's twin. My second suite. Rigged with audio, video, and 2 hidden observers, my legal team. I wanted to see if the core had rotted all the way through. If she'd throw herself back into the same pond that drowned her last time. I didn't have to wait long. By day 3, she was smiling too long. By day 5, she slipped her number under the guest's door, wrapped in a room service receipt. Classic. My assistant sent me the footage. I didn't watch all of it. I didn't need to. Just enough to remind myself, the leopard never changes stripes. The next morning, I left an envelope at the front desk with her name on it. Inside was a single slip of paper. I may have disappeared, Elena. But you? You never existed. That was the last word I gave her. Not because I was cruel. Because I was finished. Elena faded like a bad memory. That was always the plan. You erase a virus by isolating it. But some viruses hide in your bloodstream. And mine? He shared my last name. His name was Ryan. Half-brother, technically. 5 years younger. Same father. Different mothers. But he lived with us full-time growing up, so I never treated him like a half-anything. I taught him how to ride a bike. How to shave. I covered for him when he wrecked Dad's Buick in high school and lied to Mom's face with a straight voice and burning lungs. We were close. Or so I thought. Turns out, I was just a stepping stone he learned to walk on. I didn't think much about Ryan in those first years after I disappeared. He'd stayed behind. Said he couldn't get involved in the mess Elena had stirred up. Coward, I thought back then. But harmless. Then, last week, my finance guy flagged a pattern. A holding company, Sterling Bridge LLC, was bidding aggressively on a regional logistics firm I'd been eyeing for months. Too aggressively. Like someone was trying to block the deal. We ran the chain. Ownership masked through a trust, then a dummy corp in Wyoming. But the name on the incorporation docs? Ryan. I stared at it like a viper had just hissed from the paper. He hadn't just stayed behind. He'd thrived. Using my contacts. My silence. My absence. He'd been building a mirror image of my empire in secret, founded on the very ashes I left behind. And he knew. Oh, he knew I was alive. My lawyer found an email chain from 9 years ago. Ryan had been CC'd. Elena had told him I left. Not that I vanished. Not that she had me buried in absentia, or that she'd spit on the memory of our marriage within weeks. He knew everything. And he said nothing. Why? Because if I was gone, he could inherit the network. And if I came back? Well, now we were competitors. I booked a meeting with him under an alias. Nothing dramatic. Just a low-profile investor looking to talk merger over dinner. We met at a quiet rooftop restaurant. Candlelight. Rooftops. Jazz in the background. He showed up in a navy blue suit, crisp and confident, like he hadn't just stepped on my grave to climb a rung higher. He didn't recognize me at first. Not until I said, "You still tap your thumb when you're nervous." He froze. Looked up slowly. His eyes did a double take, once at the voice, again at my face. Alex. I nodded once. Didn't smile. You're supposed to be gone. I said. Yeah, I was. He sat back in his chair like gravity just got heavier. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted, looking for exits. Or excuses. I didn't know. You knew. I slid a folder across the table. Inside. The email chains. The shell company paperwork. A photo of him and Elena at a bar 2 years after I disappeared, sharing drinks like war heroes. I trusted you, I said quietly. Like a brother. I had your back when Dad didn't even know how to be one. I didn't, he started. You did, I said. And now you'll pay for it. But not in fire. In silence. He blinked, confused. You'll dissolve Sterling Bridge by Friday, I said. Your controlling shares will be sold to a firm I name. Your board will receive a letter of resignation. And you'll issue a press statement about a long overdue sabbatical. He shook his head. You don't have that kind of power. I smirked. Oh, Ryan, I don't need power. I have leverage. I stood and left the table, dropping a phone on his plate. It contained the last 6 months of his financial history, offshore accounts, questionable procurement deals, and one very private video of him at a conference in Prague that the media would salivate over. I gave him 3 days. He caved in 2. By the time the weekend hit, Ryan was gone from the company, scrubbed from its site, and blacklisted from every major firm in 3 states. Another ghost. But this one? I made. I wasn't planning to visit the grave. Not yet. But something about watching Ryan fold like wet laundry made me nostalgic. Not for him. For the silence that used to exist before everything fractured. So I went. Same cemetery. Same weathered headstone. Marion Whitlock, beloved mother. 1958 to 2001. I used to come here every year. Quietly. No flowers. Just respect. She didn't need roses, she needed peace. And I needed to remember what kindness looked like. Once, I stood there in the crisp morning air, suit jacket flapping in the wind, hands in my pockets, feeling less like a billionaire and more like the son of a woman who never got to see who I became. Then I heard it. A soft cough behind me, and a voice I hadn't heard in nearly 15 years. I thought you were dead. I turned slowly. My father stood 10 feet away. Older. Grayer. Still wearing those damn orthopedic shoes like pride never touched him. Dad. It was all I said. One syllable. Enough to taste the rust. I came to visit her, he said, nodding toward the grave like it explained everything. Didn't expect. Well, I could say the same. He looked thinner, but not frail. His eyes, once hard with disappointment, now looked hollow. Like something behind them had died too. Ryan called me, he said after a pause. Told me you were back. Told me you'd ruined him. I didn't flinch. No. He did that all on his own. I just made it public. Dad didn't defend him. Didn't scold me. Didn't ask where I'd been or how I'd survived. Instead, he said, you were always the smart one. The dangerous one. I almost laughed. You called me a failure the day I dropped out to build my own business. Said I'd be flipping burgers by 30. I was wrong, he said quietly. That caught me off guard. He'd never said that before. Ever. You were weak, I replied. Not wrong. You just couldn't handle a son who didn't beg for your validation. He nodded, like he'd rehearsed the hit and still accepted the punch. I didn't come to fight, he said. Then why come at all? Because I think you need to know something. He reached into his coat and handed me an envelope. Yellowed. Frayed at the corners. My name written in my mother's handwriting. I stared at it like it was a trick. She wrote it before she died, he said. Told me to give it to you when you needed it most. I guess I figured. This is that moment. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I said, why'd you keep it from me? His voice cracked. The first time I ever saw regret were his face. Because you were already angry. And I thought this would only make it worse. He turned to walk away. At the edge of the path, he looked back and said, I never told her I loved her, not once after the diagnosis. I thought I'd have more time. Then he left. No fanfare. No goodbye. Just the sound of leaves under worn-out shoes and a letter in my hand that weighed more than any check I'd ever cashed. Back at my suite, I finally opened it. 3 pages. Neat cursive. The smell of lavender, faint but real. And in the middle, one sentence stood out like a flare in the dark. Don't trust your uncle. My stomach turned. Because she wasn't talking about a metaphorical uncle. She meant Uncle Vince. The man who raised funds for my first startup. The man who mentored Ryan after I left. The man who coincidentally was trying to buy the same Port Authority deal I was about to close next week. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Love always, Mom. And for the first time in years, I felt rage and clarity hold hands. Uncle Vince. The man who taught me how to ride a bike and how to count cards and blackjack, usually in the same afternoon. I remember the cigar smoke, the late-night meetings in his basement, the briefcases that always had too many locks for something above board. To the world, Vincent Whitlock was a philanthropist and venture capitalist. To the family, he was colorful. To me, no. He was a target. He was hosting one of his Friday games, private, invitation-only poker in the back room of a country club he didn't own, but acted like he did. Wealthy fools circled him like moths, all trying to beat the man they considered a charming old shark. He didn't recognize me right away. I walked in dressed like any of them, Armani jacket, no tie, a glass of neat bourbon in one hand, a metal case in the other. I took the empty seat to his right. His eyes flicked to me. You're new. Not really, I said, and took a long sip. It took him 3 hands to realize. I watched it happen, the flicker of memory, the furrowed brow, the way his lips went tight around his cigar. Alex, he finally said. Good to see you, Uncle, I said, laying down a flush that cleaned half the table. We didn't talk until the break. He followed me out to the balcony, that fake smile glued to his face. Well, I'll be damned, he said, voice tight. Back from the dead. Seems like a theme in our family. He chuckled, but his eyes were scanning, calculating. You disappeared right when things were starting to pick up, he said. Shame, really. Could have made a killing. Some of us did, I said. He gave a slow nod. So what's this about, Alex? Not just poker, I assume. I know about the bid, I said. The Port Authority deal. You're backing the Eastern Group, using shell companies to drive up the price. Trying to bleed out my leverage. He raised an eyebrow. Just business, kid. Nothing personal. You built that group using money from Mom's trust. That stopped him. Just for a second. Just enough. I stepped in closer. She told me not to trust you. From her deathbed. That's how rotten you smell. His mask cracked, but only slightly. Your mother was a bleeding heart. Never understood how the world works. She understood blood, I said, and how it shouldn't be bought. He thought he was untouchable. That's what men like him rely on. The illusion of power, not the substance. So I broke the illusion. I had my assistant leak a tip to 3 journalists that Eastern Group's main investor was laundering money through Caribbean resorts, complete with time-stamped flight logs, accounting trails, and one very damning voicemail of Vince threatening a junior partner. That voicemail came from a burner phone Vince gave Ryan years ago. Ryan, of course, sold it to me cheap once he realized what game I was playing. By Monday, Eastern Group's board was in shambles. By Tuesday, the Port Authority deal came back on the table under my terms. And by Wednesday, Vince's face was on 3 business gossip sites under the headline. Kingmaker caught in scandal. Whitlock legacy unraveling? I didn't call him. Didn't gloat. But I did send a message. A box, hand-delivered. Inside. A torn card from our poker game, the Joker, sliced in half. And a sticky note. You taught me the game. I just play it better. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. No tux. No suit. Just me. And for the first time, I didn't see the broken man who vanished 10 years ago. I saw the architect. Not of vengeance. Of balance. I should have known. From the beginning, when I disappeared, there was one person I trusted blindly. One person I told everything to. Gave access to accounts. Passwords. My backup plans. The skeleton key to my future. Noah Kane. My best friend since high school. The guy who stood beside me at my wedding. The guy who helped me vanish when Elena made her wish. He'd been the one to say, you can't just disappear without a net. Let me help. He wired me cash when I had none. Helped create shell identities. Smuggled me burner phones. Said he'd keep tabs on Elena and the city. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He had nothing to gain. He was single, childless, made decent money in cyber risk consulting. He wasn't flashy. He was solid. At least that's what I thought. Until now. It started with a dinner. A new partner at one of my investment firms, a woman named Justine, casually mentioned a boutique cybersecurity outfit being acquired by a rising player in the defense space. She dropped the name like it was nothing. Kane Digital Systems. I blinked. Noah was just consulting, last I checked. I thought he was still in that same apartment with the busted couch and dog-eared Clancy novels. That's what he told me 6 months ago. So I had my team dig. Turns out, Noah had been building something. Quietly. Efficiently. And using patterns, code structures, I recognized. Because I wrote them. Years ago, in the early days of my exile, I had built a rudimentary security encryption tool for storing my offshore files. I had shown it to one person. Noah. He said it was brilliant but raw. Said it needed more development. Apparently, he took care of that for me. Because the core of Kane Digital Systems was my framework, just polished, commercialized, and sold as proprietary. To defense contractors. To banks. To agencies. To the very people I had once hoped to work with myself. I sat in my office that night, staring at the proof. Source code comparisons. Metadata. Deployment tags. His fingerprints were everywhere, but so were mine. He hadn't just copied my tool. He had built an empire with it. And the worst part? He never told me. So I called him. He answered on the 3rd ring, same relaxed voice. Alex. Been a while. You okay? You tell me. A pause. What's this about? Let's skip the warm-up, Noah. I know about Kane Digital. I know about the framework. My framework. Another pause. This one longer. Then, it wasn't like that. No, I said, quiet rage threading through my voice. You mean it wasn't theft? It wasn't betrayal? What was it? sharing without permission. I kept you alive, man, he snapped. When you were off the grid, when you had nothing, I was the one keeping you afloat. I used the tools you didn't even know how to monetize. And that makes it yours. I built it up, he said. All you had was a skeleton. I made it a body. That's what you always do. You start something and expect everyone else to finish it for you. I almost laughed. That's funny, because the last 10 years say otherwise. He exhaled. What do you want, Alex? A cut? An apology? No, I said, standing. I want a reckoning. Then I hung up. The next morning, Kane Digital's acquisition got pulled. Quietly. Their largest client, a financial group I owned 40% of through proxy, rescinded the deal. That triggered an investor review. That triggered a board meeting. Within 48 hours, Kane Digital's stock had dropped 38%. And I wasn't finished. I had a lawyer draft a suit. Copyright infringement. Intellectual theft. The skeleton he used to build his empire? I still had the bones. I gave Noah a chance to settle. He refused. So I leaked the lawsuit to the press. Attached the earliest commits of the code, time-stamped in my name. Developers picked up the story. Forums lit up. The narrative turned. He went from visionary to opportunist overnight. Noah called again. I let it ring, then deleted his contact. I stood on the balcony of my tower that night. City lights below. 10 years ago, I would have given anything to be here with someone like Noah beside me. But now, the silence was better. Safer. It had been boarded up for years. The house. Our house. The one Elena and I bought right after the wedding. Back when we were still pretending to be in love, before her words made me vanish. 2 stories. White siding. Black shutters. A porch swing she never used. The lawn was always half dead. We used to argue about who'd mow it. Now the grass was trimmed. New shutters. Fresh paint. Somebody lived here. I drove by once. Just curiosity. Call it masochism. But I saw something that made me hit the brakes so hard the car behind me laid on the horn. A girl. No older than 10. On the porch, chalk in hand. Drawing stars on the steps. And she looked exactly like my sister did at that age. Same brown eyes. Same chin. I sat there, stunned, as the door opened and a woman stepped out. Elena. Older. Thinner. Tired. And she called out, "Marcy, get washed up. Dinner's almost ready." The next morning, I made a quiet call to a friend at the records office. He owed me a favor. I told him I needed one name, Marcy Whitlock. 30 minutes later, he texted, "Birth certificate filed under Elena Grace Whitlock. Father, unknown. DOB, 9 months and 2 weeks after your disappearance." My heart stopped. Not metaphorically. It physically stuttered. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had hidden my daughter from me. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I planned. I filed a petition for a paternity test the same day. Quietly. Legally. By the book. No media. No threats. But the storm was coming. 2 days later, a process server knocked on Elena's door and handed her the envelope. I watched from across the street in a rental car, dark windows, engine off. She opened it, read the contents, and sank to the porch like her knees gave out. That night, she showed up at my office. No makeup. No pretense. Just a mother, aged by shame. "You weren't supposed to come back," she said, voice raw. "That seems to be a running theme." "She doesn't know who you are," Elena whispered. "She thinks her dad died before she was born." "Convenient lie," I said, pouring myself a drink. "Keeps the questions down. Keeps the child support non-existent." I didn't want to complicate her life. "No," I said coldly. "You didn't want to complicate yours." She looked down. No defense. None that mattered. "What are you going to do?" "Be a father." She looked up sharply. "You can't just stop me." I cut in. "You'll lose. I have the proof, the means, and the resolve. I'm her mother. And I'm the man you erased, who still built an empire while you lied to a child about who she is." Her voice cracked. "Please don't take her from me." I didn't reply. I just stared until she left. 2 weeks later, the test came back. 99.997% probability. Marcy was mine. The court granted me visitation pending a formal custody hearing. Elena didn't contest. And the first time I met her, my daughter, she sat across from me in a small office, legs swinging, eyes curious but calm. "You're Alex?" she asked. I smiled. "Yeah, but you can call me Dad. Or whatever feels right." She tilted her head, studying me. "You look like me," she said. "But taller." I laughed. Actually laughed. She grinned. Can we get ice cream? Anything you want, kiddo. We sat on a park bench an hour later. She had a double scoop. I didn't touch mine. I just watched her, listened to her, and felt something shift inside me. 10 years ago, I disappeared. Now, I was here. Real. Solid. And I had a reason to stay. Elena filed her response 2 weeks later. She wanted full custody. Claimed I was emotionally unstable, disconnected from reality, financially controlling, and, my personal favorite, a manipulative ghost with a savior complex. I laughed when I read that last line. It wasn't rage that hit me. It was confirmation. Someone was coaching her, feeding her phrases, setting the stage. And I had a very good idea who. The morning after the filing, I got a message from an old contact, someone who worked legal for a lobbying firm in D.C. She sent me a photo. Elena, sitting at lunch, across from Vince. Uncle Vince. Fresh off his scandal. Bankrupt on paper. Poisoned in the press. But apparently not finished swinging. I underestimated him. He wasn't just trying to claw back relevance. He was trying to use my daughter to do it. See, family courts are funny things. They don't care how rich you are. They care how clean you look. And Vince knew I'd burned enough bridges to fill a river. He was propping up Elena, legally, financially, and behind the scenes, to paint himself as the stable influence who could help a child adjust to a trauma-inducing parental reappearance. That was the phrase their motion used. Trauma-inducing parental reappearance. They even cited psychological studies, ones Vince had funded, of course. Elena's legal team quadrupled overnight. Celebrity custody attorneys, PR firms, a media consultant. The press was already circling. One story ran with the headline, "The billionaire dad who abandoned his daughter and wants her back?" And just like that, they thought they had me cornered. But here's the thing about building an empire brick by brick. You remember where every weakness is, because you laid the damn mortar. And I still had allies. One of them? Margot Flynn, court-appointed child psychologist. Worked over 300 custody evaluations in the last decade. Ruthless in her honesty. Immune to PR pressure. The kind of woman who once told a senator's ex-wife, "You're not unstable. You're just cruel." I arranged for her to oversee the initial visitation evaluations. Neutral grounds. Quiet setting. She met me. She met Marcy. She met Elena. And her report? Brutal. Father demonstrates stable emotional connection, long-term planning, and healthy paternal instincts. Child is emotionally curious, eager to bond, and shows no signs of fear or distrust. Mother appears agitated, defensive, and frequently redirects child's emotional cues towards self-validation. Recommendation: shared custody with expansion toward majority paternal care. I didn't gloat, but I did have it delivered to Vince's office by courier, along with a note. "If you want to play father, Vince, you better learn how to actually care." That night, I got a call from a blocked number. "Back off," Vince's voice growled. "You win custody, you still lose. You'll never have peace." "I didn't build my life for peace," I replied. "I built it for justice. And you've got a bill coming due." Then I hung up. The court date is set. Elena's still fighting. But the tide's turning. And Vince? He doesn't know it yet, but I've already filed a subpoena to unseal his sealed financial records. He wanted war. I'm giving him dissection. Courtroom 3B. Family division. Stained ceiling tiles. Flickering fluorescent lights. Smelled like too much dust and too little justice. This wasn't where billionaires came to play. This was where they got humbled. And I was here not to win, but to end it. Elena sat at the front with her lawyers, 3 of them, all suited like it was a corporate merger. Her hair was styled, makeup flawless, expression rehearsed. Next to her, Vince. Uncle. Snake. Investor in nothing but power. His cufflinks sparkled like they meant something. They didn't. He gave me a small, smug nod. I didn't nod back. Marcy sat with the guardian ad litem in the gallery. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she waved when I looked at her. I waved back, heart twisting. This was for her. Every dollar. Every sleepless night. Every strategy. The judge called the room to order. Gray beard. Sharp eyes. No patience for theatrics. Elena's lawyers spoke first. Talked about disruption of the child's emotional environment. Cited 10-year abandonment, sudden reappearance, and undue financial influence. They made me sound like a ghost in a gilded suit, too rich to parent and too detached to care. They even played a clip from a podcast I did last year about risk-taking and isolation, trying to paint me as unstable. The judge didn't flinch. He just asked, "Is the child at risk?" Their answer came in stutters. Then it was my turn. I stood, one man against a table full of voices. I disappeared, I began. That part is true. But not because I ran from responsibility. I ran from betrayal. From a woman who wished me out of existence. Who lied about my death. And who robbed a child of the father she was born to know. Gasps. Papers shuffled. Elena looked like glass under pressure. I turned to the judge. I've submitted a full report. Income. Assets. Medical clearance. Psychological review. I don't need to prove I'm stable. I came here to prove she's not. I handed the clerk a flash drive. Exhibit A, private financial correspondence between Mrs. Whitlock and Mr. Vincent Whitlock, outlining a strategy to leverage the child for court sympathy and financial favor. Vince jumped up. That's private. Sit down, Mr. Whitlock, the judge snapped. I continued, calm, cold. They conspired to fabricate an emotional dependency. Emails, payments, even discussions of media coverage to pressure the court. They didn't plan for the child. They planned for control. I sat down. For 5 seconds, the courtroom was silent. Then the judge leaned forward. We'll take a recess before ruling. Outside, Vince stormed up to me in the hallway. You think this ends with custody? He hissed. You think that child will ever love a man who ran? I stepped close. Closer than comfort. She doesn't have to love me today. She just has to know I came back for her. He stared. But the mask was cracking. He knew. It was over. 30 minutes later, the judge returned. His words were clear. Joint custody awarded, with progressive expansion toward primary paternal care within 18 months pending child's continued adjustment. Supervised transition required. Motion to limit visitation rights of Mr. Vincent Whitlock granted. The gavel dropped. And just like that, I won. Elena didn't speak. Not then. She stared at the floor like it might open up and swallow her whole. Vince walked out first. Shoulders stiff. Rage brewing. I didn't care. Because when Marcy ran up and hugged me in that hallway, clung to my chest like I was an anchor in a storm. That was the real verdict. It was raining the night, I told her. Soft, slow rain. The kind that didn't flood, just whispered. Like it knew something was about to shift. Marcy and I sat on the floor of my study, surrounded by books and Legos and empty hot cocoa mugs. She was in pajamas. I was in silence. She was quiet too, coloring. Then she looked up. Mom says you were gone because you were mad at her. That was her opening move. Kids don't dig. They drop truth like stones and watch the ripples. I nodded slowly. Partly true. She says you left because you didn't want us. There it was. The dagger. Softly spoken. Sharper than steel. I breathed in, then let it go. No, Marcy. I didn't leave you. I didn't even know about you. She blinked. But I'm 10. I know, I said. And I've missed every one of those years. Every birthday. Every first day of school. Every time you were sick or scared or needed someone to talk to. Her voice was small. Why didn't she tell you? I looked her in the eye. Because she was afraid I'd come back. I told her the story in pieces. Not with venom. Not with fire. Just facts. How her mother and I were married. How things broke. How I overheard something that changed everything. How I left, not because I wanted to, but because I thought it was the only way to survive. How I built a new life, one I never expected to intersect with hers. And how, the moment I saw her, I knew. You looked like a piece of my heart I'd forgotten I was missing. She didn't say anything. She just crawled into my lap and curled there like a cat under a thunderstorm. A few minutes later, she asked, "Do you hate her?" Silence. I stared at the window, at the city lights beyond. No, I said slowly. Hate's heavy, and I've carried enough weight. But I don't trust her. And I don't forget. Marcy looked up. Will I be like her? That one almost cracked me. No, I said, firmer. You'll be better. Because you'll know what honesty looks like. What loyalty feels like. What love sounds like when it doesn't come with conditions. I gave her a box then. Wrapped in silver paper, tied with a blue ribbon. Inside was a necklace. Nothing flashy. Just a small locket. Inside. One photo of me, young. One of her, recent. And the words engraved, I came back. She held it like it was a secret. You don't have to wear it, I said. Just know it's real. She smiled. I want to wear it tomorrow. And show everyone at school. Then she kissed my cheek and ran off to bed. I stayed on the floor long after she left. Because I knew what was coming next. Winning in court was one thing. But the real battle? was public. Vince wasn't done. And Elena? She was planning her final move. It began with a whisper, an anonymous blog post, an insider's story about a ruthless billionaire who ghosted his wife and allegedly resurfaced only to win a PR-friendly custody battle by weaponizing his wealth. It didn't name me directly, but everyone knew. Then came the tweets, the subreddits, the podcasts. Hashtag Vanishing Father started trending. My name wasn't in the headline, but my shadow was all over it. And when I traced the IP that first published the story, it came from a condo Vince owned in Manhattan. But Vince wasn't stupid. He never left fingerprints. It was Elena who added the heat. She went on a talk show, one of those daytime emotional vomit fests hosted by someone who used to be a weather anchor and now calls herself a trauma-informed advocate. She sat on that couch and told the world I was dangerous, cold, controlling, capable of emotional warfare. I was afraid for myself. And for my child, she said, blinking hard at the camera. Even now, I don't feel safe. No mention of the years she erased me. No mention of the locket around our daughter's neck. Then the board meeting happened. My company, Morellis Corp., was solid, profitable, clean books. But perception? That's the currency investors really trade in. The chairman called me into a confidential executive session. One of the junior partners looked ready to burst. We've had multiple inquiries from the press, he said. If this turns into a scandal, then let them print it, I said. Every word. They don't need facts. They just need headlines. I leaned forward. Then let me give them a better one. That night, I released everything. A statement. Evidence. Audio of Elena's phone calls to Vince, coaching her on what to say on TV. Financial records showing payments to PR firms from Vince's shell companies. Court transcripts. Custody evaluations. Screenshots of the falsified social media activity planted by his handlers. And then, the kicker. A video. Elena. Caught by a private investigator I hired 6 months ago, long before the court date. Sitting at a wine bar with Vince, laughing as she rehearsed her media soundbites. Do I say abandonment or trauma first, she asks. Go with trauma, he says. It's harder. They toast to it. I sent the entire package to one journalist. Just one. The one who had reached out to me with integrity. The one who waited instead of assuming. She released it all. By sunrise, Vince was radioactive again. And Elena? Social media turned fast. People may love a scandal, but they despise manipulation, especially when it's caught on video. I walked into the office that morning wearing a dark suit and no tie. The board was silent. I said, anyone else want to test me? No one answered. I nodded. Then let's get back to work. Later that night, Elena called. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Her voice was quiet. You destroyed me. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you do it in the dark. She didn't respond. Then she whispered, she still loves you. You know, our daughter. I know, I said. That's why I'm still standing. He invited me to dinner. Vince, the man who weaponized a woman, twisted a child, and set the internet on fire to bury me. He asked to meet at a rooftop steakhouse overlooking the city. I said yes. Not because I was hungry, but because some endings deserve a front row seat. He stood as I approached, all polished charm and pinstripe desperation. Glad you came, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I've always believed in letting a man dig his own grave, I replied, taking my seat. Just figured I'd watch the last shovel go in. He chuckled, but his eyes were flat. Look, he said, folding his hands. We've both had our share of, what do they call it? Collateral damage. I said nothing. I'm offering a reset, he continued. I walk away. Elena walks away. You get your clean slate, your daughter, your empire, everything. No more press. No more noise. And what do you want? He smiled like a man who thought the punchline was coming. Just a cut, he said. A quiet stake in Morellis. 10%. Backdoor. Silent. Off books. You keep everything. But I stay in the room. I didn't blink. Didn't breathe. 10% of Morellis? That was a 9-figure favor. And he wanted it like a parasite begs for permission to stay near the wound. I leaned in, my voice low. You know what the problem is with cockroaches, Vince? He raised an eyebrow. They don't die easy. But eventually, they stop hiding. I reached into my coat and dropped a file on the table. Leather-bound. Heavy. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside. A timeline. Financial records. Testimonies. Screenshots. Emails. and one signature from his former assistant, a woman he'd fired 3 years ago. She flipped the moment she saw the tapes I had. The evidence proved what I always suspected. Vince siphoned investor capital from one of his former tech funds to buy a vacation compound in the Caymans. Then used Marcy's custody battle as leverage to threaten a silent board seat in my company to launder the debt back through my own books. A perfect crime. Until the old ghost he thought was buried came back with eyes wide open. "I'm not giving you 10%, I said. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "No," I said, standing. "You will." By morning, I had forwarded the file to the SEC, the IRS, and a very interested journalist who had already been investigating one of Vince's shell funds for aggressive accounting practices. By noon, Vince was trending again. This time, not on Twitter, on the FBI's watch list. I walked into Marcy's school that afternoon to pick her up. The security guard waved. The teacher smiled. She ran to me full speed, backpack bouncing. "Can we go to the museum?" she asked. "Of course," I said, "but only if we get ice cream first." She grinned. "Double scoop?" I nodded. "We can even get 3. I'm feeling dangerous today."